Well, maybe they're just incompetent and don't have it in for President Trump. Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, both the Washington Post and the New York Times carry a story today, breaking within the last hour as we record this, that says that the Inspector General for the Justice Department, Michael Horowitz, did a random sample of some 29 FISA applications and found that every single one of them contained errors. This is in follow-up to the story that we heard a few months ago that of the errors within the FISA applications to surveil Carter Page, an associate of President Trump's. As it turns out, Bill, it looks like the FBI just doesn't do it right all the time, and it may not be just a politically motivated botching of these applications. Does that make sense to you? Is it possible that the FBI just isn't following their own procedures correctly?
Well, let's go back to the whole kerfluffle a couple months ago. It was shown that the FBI made 17 of these errors. And if you assume that the FBI has a random ability to fill out one of these things appropriately, you would hope that it would be better than that. But let's just say that they had a 50-50 chance of getting it right. All of those 17 errors work in favor of the people that were trying to pin this case on Donald Trump. And I'm not a mathematician, but I suspect that if they had a 50-50 chance, that would be about the same as flipping a coin and having heads come up 17 times in a row, which is exceedingly unlikely. So what this is it's, as you said in your introduction, it is concrete proof of either gross incompetence, malicious intent, or both.
Now, let me say up front that the FBI has said that they have already, in the wake of the Carter Page situation, begun to implement better training, more checklists, and appropriate ways to get their agents
the FBI,
to fill
Scott,
out the FISA applications properly. I'm sorry, what was
that? This is not the Department of Agriculture filling out FISA forms. This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a department of the Department of Justice. To say that all of a sudden they need training so that they can get one of them right is the kind of bureaucratic doublespeak that passes for taking responsibility these days. Mistakes were made, and we've instituted additional training so that the agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Department of Justice can correctly fill out one of these FISA forms. We're not talking about elementary school kids or some teacher someplace in Des Moines who decided he wanted to fill out one of these things for his high school class. We're talking about the Federal Bureau of Investigation. These people shouldn't need additional training. They shouldn't need special counseling. They should know how to do this. It should be a daily part of their job. And the evidence is, the factual evidence is that since this isn't happening, this department has been so thoroughly corrupted by incompetence and political weaponizing that it's tempting to just basically sack the whole crowd and start from the beginning.
Well, and apparently the FBI is still hiring human beings, Bill, because of the 29 random sample, I've got an alert thing on my tablet, which I can shut down right there, of the random sampling of some 29 applications. They found problems with every single one of them. In 25 of the applications, the review found an average of 20 problems each with the applications. One of these applications had 65 issues. And they didn't even dig deep as they could have because they didn't look through raw case files to determine if there were mitigating factors that were not included in the applications, which is part of the process you're supposed to do, one of the critiques of the Carter Page application. But apparently, Horowitz found all these problems without even going that extra step and saying, okay, well, should there have been some mitigating factors brought into these applications? It does sound like rank incompetence rather than political machinations.
Well, if it were rank incompetence, then the 17 applications in question dealing with Donald Trump would have been 50-50, more or less, but they weren't. So
you mean
it's
the
not
17
just
issues that were found with the FISA applications regarding Carter Page?
Correct. So if it was just random incompetence or gross incompetence, you would expect that if they're going to get everything wrong just out of a random sort of we can't get anything right, You would think that half of these errors would break for the president, the other half of the errors would break against the president, but
I don't
they
know,
didn't.
Bill. And the only reason I say I don't know is because I had a little experience working in county government and therefore came into contact with a district attorney. And it seems to me that the law enforcement officers, at least at that level, their reward was in finding people who did things wrong. It may just be a natural human bias to look for those things, and therefore it wouldn't be surprising to say that they all broke against the accused or against the defendant or against, in this case, the person being surveilled. It could just be human nature, no?
Well, if it's human nature, then there's a lot about human nature that is problematic, to say the least, which is why we have a series of laws in this country designed to not only limit the damage that individual incompetence can do, but mostly to limit the amount of damage that can be done either covertly or overtly in order to amass power. So one of the processes that we use in order to eliminate human error and human bias and human desire to pin the tail on the donkey are things like FISA applications. And if the FBI can't get these right, then that tells me that the FBI has no respect for them whatsoever. It means it's not just a question of a lack of training or a lack of skill. The very issue indicates a lack of respect. If you are telling me that they've gotten what was the base sample again that you
they
started
just
with,
took a
29?
random sample of 29 applications.
29. Okay, so if they do 29 applications, none of them are done correctly. Some of them contain 65 errors, and from what you said about all the things they didn't explore, that would be the minimum on that particular report. That not only tells you that the FBI has other things to do than their job, which is figuring out how to fill out these applications, much more importantly, it tells me that the FBI has developed into a culture where these things are of so little importance to them that they can't get them right. It is literally a rubber stamp for them. They don't have any respect for it. They don't have any sense of clarity or fair play or anything. It's just simply the rubber stamp that they submit so they can go off and look into whoever they want to. This is not how this is supposed to work, needless to say. And the fact that they got 29 out of 29 wrong, coupled with the fact that several years ago, the Department of Homeland Security did a test and they discovered that the Homeland Security Transportation Safety Administration, TSA, didn't miss 5% of all the weapons and explosives that were smuggled in as a test of the system. They missed 95%. They got 1 out of 20 right. The FBI's got 0 out of 29 right. And when you take this attitude and you extend it further, you see that virtually every aspect of the government has this kind of record. And it makes you wonder why people are saying, geez, why is Donald Trump going to the private sector for all of this COVID-19 relief? He should be activating the government with a record of 0 out of 29 for the FBI, 1 out of 20 for TSA, and similar records for every other agency in the United States
Bill, you
government.
bring up a very good point, and I wonder if this opens a much broader question. It's not just a matter, perhaps, of FBI incompetence or TSA incompetence, but let's take the FISA court. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act is a secret process by which the government gets permission to listen in to citizens who may be carrying on conversations with foreign entities, ostensibly because they could be a risk to the United States of America in some way. Bill, is it possible that maybe there's just no good way for your federal government to conduct individual surveillance efforts against U.S. citizens? And maybe some of the Republicans included who pushed this in the wake of the terror attacks years ago maybe should back off and reassess and say, wait a minute, maybe this isn't a role we want the federal government in at all.
In the 21st century, it is impossible to provide any level of protection for the American people without the ability to monitor things like phone calls from known domestic terrorists to terrorist organizations. That simply has to happen. That's not where the failure is. The failure is that nobody gets punished for anything. The head of the TSA. What happens when you get 19 out of 20 wrong?
You just stated that categorically with no reasoning. You just said it. That's not where the failure is. Why is that not where the failure is? How do you know that it's possible to do this with excellence, considering the random sample had errors in every single instance?
Well, what I'm trying to explain to you is the difference between a failure of a system versus a failure of an idea. The idea is sound. The idea of going to a court is sound. This is how we do domestic warrants. Warrants are a necessary part of our lives. And we have basically said that that a reasonable compromise towards everybody's sense of privacy and the sanctity of their home, a reasonable compromise is that the police should be able to make an overwhelming case that criminal activity is ongoing inside that house at this moment, and therefore a search warrant or whatever is issued. The same situation applies to these FISA applications, but clearly, no one is questioning the agents about this in the kind of detail that they should be questioning before they're approved. And more importantly, much more importantly, if the agency is failing 29 out of 29, then not only do the agents who failed those application forms need to be fired, the entire structure, the entire management of the FBI needs to be absolutely and utterly reformed from people who understand what the FBI is supposed to be about. Most field agents have a very clear idea of this. I've talked to field agents who said that James Comey has done more damage to the FBI than the Soviet Union could have done in 100 years. And they're right. So this is not a failure of the system. This is a failure to implement the system. And there's a big difference between these two cases.
So right now we are doing some kind of accountability here, at least in this random sampling. The Inspector General is clearly looking for ways that this process could be improved, looking perhaps for bad actors or bad processes. But it seems to me that what you're calling for is another layer of secrecy upon the layer of secrecy that is currently the process that our covert agents use. They go to covert agent goes to secret court. Secret court needs to be monitored by somebody. That can't be out in the open. So we need another secret entity to monitor their behavior to make sure that nobody in the secret court is doing anything wrong, nor the covert agents. That seems like a vicious cycle there.
It would be a vicious cycle if that's what I'd said. But that's not what I said.
I didn't say that's what you said. I'm trying to imagine what you're suggesting.
Okay, so what I'm suggesting is that the people that the agents go to in order to get these applications approved, the judges presumably who are in charge of this, need to start paying a lot closer attention, and the agents need to fill out these forms right. And this isn't happening, and the reason it's not happening is crystal clear. It's extremely simple. It's not hard to figure out, and it's not hard to solve. The reason this isn't happening is because they're not being fired when they don't do their job. Period. That's it. If it's proven that this FISA application came in with 65 errors and the judge approved it, he needs to be removed from the bench. The agent who filed the report needs to be removed from the agency. How hard is this to understand? Where else do you get away with this kind of behavior except inside the vast labyrinth of the federal government? Where else do you get away with these kind of things?
Well, that's why I asked the original question, Bill, because you've got this vast labyrinth of the federal government. When you were going on about this particular agency, I thought, well, what do you expect of federal bureaucrats? You're expecting a level of scrutiny and integrity behind closed doors that the average American couldn't conduct on his own time. And I think it sounds like you're envisioning some sort of G-Man from the 1940s movies where these guys are, the Elliot Ness, unshakable integrity, so good that we don't even have to be looking over their shoulder.
I am saying precisely that we need to find the G-Man of unshakable integrity, but I'm not saying that we shouldn't be looking over their shoulder, because if you don't look over their shoulder, they're going to turn into James Comey over time. It's just a matter of time. But yes, I'm perfectly 100% willing to agree with that assessment. I am looking for people of unshakable integrity to run this agency. And to suggest that human nature does not allow for individuals with unshakable integrity is to simply deny the reality of the case. What has happened is unshakable integrity has not only become no longer a prerequisite for certain jobs in the government, should be a prerequisite for every job in the government, but not only has it not become a prerequisite, now it's a career retarding device. If you've got unshakable integrity, the way things are now with the level of corruption, then that's bad for your career. Then you suffer for that. You'd probably be driven out of office if you have unshakable integrity. But unshakable integrity is what it takes. And the people who are responsible for this, the people whose ultimate responsibility for this corruption in the FBI is you and me. We're the people who are responsible for this because we're the people that aren't holding them accountable. The government is only held accountable by the people and the threat of the people to throw the elected officials out of office and have the elected officials throw these career bureaucrats out of office.
I don't know.
And we are simply, I'm afraid, I'm sorry to break it to you.
No, I was going to say is I'm a little reluctant to hold to account the people who have the ability to secretly surveil me.
Scott, we're not talking about people secretly surveilling you because you're not in contact with foreign powers. The entire reason that there's an application and not just simply a phone tap because they feel like it is because in the same manner of a search warrant or any other kind of warrant that violates your rights, there has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt that this kind of criminal activity is going on and that a judge who is presumably impartial in these matters and not just a potted plant who has a rubber stamp on one of its fronds, presumably is going to be the advocate for the judge is supposed to be the advocate for the person in question under surveillance. The judge is supposed to be that person's advocate. That's the reason we have these things. The judge is supposed to say, what do you want to do? We want to tap this guy's phone. What evidence do you have? Well, we got this and we heard some things about this and we didn't really like the sound of that. Dismissed. No. You want to come to me with some evidence? Then I'll talk about it. And this is exactly how the whole thing started with the Trump collusion with Russia thing and the Ukrainian thing. The FBI goes to a judge and asks for a FISA request. The judge says, what evidence do you have? The FBI says, well, it's been reported in CNN that he's doing this. The judge should say, what source is that? Where does CNN get its source? At which point the FBI would have to say, well, we're the source for the CNN report that we're using for evidence for the necessity of this application being approved. You hit it right on the head. You've got it absolutely right. What we are missing in gross quantities is not masks or respirators in this country. We are missing people of unimpeachable integrity, and that is necessary. And what's more necessary is that people of unimpeachable integrity have to be supervised and monitored by other people, presumably of unimpeachable integrity, so that these checks and balances work their way out and so that nobody spends 20 years in an agency without anybody looking over their shoulder and suddenly start to think that, I've been doing this for so long, maybe I know what's better for the American people than the American people do.
We have a bunch of new people signing up at BillWhittle.com because they like messages like this. They not only want to hear them and want to be part of producing them, but they want to make sure they get distributed around the world. Serious discussion about the breaking news of the day, and frankly, a lot of fun too, especially on our other show, Right Angle. This one's a little bit more intense than Right Angle, but I think you're going to enjoy all of it, especially our backstage episodes, which you don't get to see unless you're a member. So why don't you go to BillWhittle.com right now and do what so many other people have done, especially in this month of March. And they've signed up to become a member and become a producer of this programming. For Bill Whittle,
it's kind of ironic that we hear almost universally from our members that their favorite show is the show that we do that's the least show.
Yes, it's the least produced.
It's the least produced, lowest content.
As far as it doesn't go out to anybody except the members. It
is basically just a half an hour of goofing off with brief interludes of possibility of content downstream, and the members say it's their favorite thing.
Well, you'll get a chance to see that when you become a member at BillWhittle.com. For those members and for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.